seen the inside of an architecture firm. Tall, sunburned at the collar, jaw set like he'd been arguing with someone before she got there and hadn't finished. Reading it, he repeated. Char patterns. Tells me how hot it got, how fast, which way the fire moved. She tapped the beam. This one's compromised about a foot from where you're standing. So actually, you might want to step back. He stepped back, didn't thank her for it. You're the architect, he said, like the word tasted wrong in his mouth. Marin Calloway. She didn't offer her hand. He didn't look like he'd take it. You're the one who didn't want me here. Jonah Kincaid. He said his own name the way some men said an objection. I didn't say I didn't want you here. I said we didn't need to pay a Dallas firm to tell us our barn burned down. We know it burned down. We were there. Your father called me. My father does a lot of things lately I don't agree with. Behind him, the homestead house sat up on its rise the way old houses did when they'd earned the right to watch everything. White paint gone the color of bone. A porch that sagged in the middle like it was tired of holding an opinion. Cattle moved in the far pasture, unbothered. Smoke smell still lived in the air, days later. The kind that got into wood and stayed. Walter Kincaid, Marin said. He's expecting me at the house at 11. It's 10:40. Then I'll wait by the barn. Looking at the thing I'm here to fix. Jonah's jaw worked like he wanted to argue with that too, and couldn't find the angle. He turned and walked off toward the equipment shed instead, and Marin let him go, because she'd learned a long time ago that the man who yells first is rarely the one you need to convince. It's the quiet one standing behind him you have to watch. She turned back to the beam. That's when she saw it, low, near the base, where the fire had eaten through old varnish and exposed raw grain underneath. A name, carved deep, the kind of carving that took real time and a real knife. Letters scorched, but legible. S. Kincaid, 1986. Someone had tried to gouge it out once, long before the fire. The gouge marks ran across half the letters in jagged scrapes, deliberate, angry, old. And then, underneath the damage, someone had carved it again. Marin crouched down and ran her thumb along the grain. Ma'am? She looked up. An older man stood at the barn's open door, hat in hand, weathered the way good leather gets weathered, friendly eyes, cautious mouth. Hank Tilden, he said. I run things around here when Walter's not looking over my shoulder. You'd be the architect, Marin Calloway. She stood,
Hi,
brushing ash off her knees.
Good morning.
Hank, who's S. Kincaid? The friendliness in his face didn't disappear exactly. It just went very, very still. That's a conversation for the house, he said. Not the barn. Why not the barn? Hank put his hat back on, slow, like he was buying himself a second to decide something. Because this barn's been standing 40 years with that name half scratched out of it, he said. And not one Kincaid has ever told me why. Walter's you at the house, Miss Calloway. I'd get up there. He left her standing in the wreckage of the barn, ash on her hands. A stranger's name burned and gouged and burned again
Hi,
into the
Tails.
one piece of wood that hadn't fully come down. And the unmistakable feeling that she'd just been handed the first piece of something nobody Creek wanted found. Walter Kincaid was already standing on the porch when Marin came the gravel path, like he'd been watching the whole exchange by the barn and decided not to step in. You're early, he said. You said 11.
Fine.
I did. He looked at his watch anyway. 71 years old and still built like a man who'd carried fence posts for a living, which he had. Come on in.
Ricky leaned back in his leather chair at the DeRusso Club, fingers interlaced as he contemplated the tangled web of relationships that had brought him to this moment. The low hum of conversation and clinking glasses from the main floor faded into the background as he focused on the task at hand. He had just given Michael, one of his trusted bodyguards, instructions to head to Hawaii and bring Hadi back. As he waited for Halima to arrive, Ricky's thoughts drifted.
Fence posts for a living, which he had. Come on in. Coffee's on. The house smelled like wood smoke and lemon polish, the kind of clean that came from someone scrubbing grief into the corners instead of talking about it. Marin followed him through a front room crowded with photographs. 3 kids at different ages, a woman with a soft laugh frozen mid-frame, cattle, a church. No photographs of a brother. She filed that away and didn't say it. Hank tells me you found something already, Walter said, pouring 2 mugs without asking if she wanted one. 10 minutes in, I found a name. He didn't turn around. A lot of names get carved into barns, not gouged out and recarved over top of the gouge marks. Marin took the mug he handed her. That's not vandalism, Mr. Kincaid. That's somebody trying to erase something and somebody else making sure it didn't stay erased. Walter's hand stilled on the counter. You're not here to read barns, he said. You're here to fix one. I can't fix what I don't understand the load on.
Listening to
Kept her
story.
voice level. That beam's been weakened twice. Once by fire.
That's my
Once
story.
by whatever happened
You
before
wanna
the fire.
forget FM.
If I rebuild around damage I don't understand, it fails again. Maybe on somebody standing under it. He was quiet long enough that the refrigerator's hum filled the whole kitchen. My brother, Walter said finally. Samuel. Carved his name in there the summer we built that barn. 1986. He set his mug down without drinking from it. He doesn't live here anymore. Doesn't or didn't. Doesn't matter which. Walter's eyes came up, and there was something in them that wasn't anger. Exactly. More like a door someone had nailed shut a long time ago and forgotten where they'd put the hammer. You're here for the structure, Miss Calloway, not the family. Marin's fine. Marin, then. He almost smiled. You'll find I run things plain around here. Plain as I can manage. The back door banged open before she could answer.
Sharon.
A girl, maybe 9, burst in with mud on her
Thank you,
shoes,
Tails.
and a half-grown barn cat clutched against her chest like contraband. Grandpa, Wyatt said, I can't keep him in the house, but... Faith. Walter's voice gentled completely, a whole different register than the one he'd used a second before. Boots off first, then we'll talk about the cat. Faith looked at Marin, openly curious, the unguarded way only kids managed. Are you the lady fixing the barn? That's me. Did you see the burned part where Uncle Samuel's name is? The kitchen went very still. Walter didn't look at Marin. He looked at his granddaughter, and his voice came out careful, the way a man walks across ice he isn't sure will hold him. Faith, go on and get your boots off. But did she... Now, sweetheart. Faith went, cat and all, dragging her muddy feet across the hardwood with the particular drama of a 9-year-old denied a follow-up question. The screen door clattered shut behind her. Marin set her mug down. She knows the name. The kids know there's a Samuel. They know there was a Samuel. Past tense. That's all they know. And that's all they need to. Walter's jaw was tight now, the door he'd nailed shut rattling on its hinges. You came here about a barn roof, Miss Calloway. I'd appreciate you keeping it that way. I will. She held his eyes. But for what it's worth, a name somebody tried twice to erase and couldn't? That's not a thing that stays buried just because everybody agrees not to dig. We'll see about that. Walter picked his coffee back up, and just like that, the conversation closed like a fist. Now, you want to talk about my barn, or you want to talk about my family? The barn, Marin said, because it was the only answer that would let her keep the job, and she needed the job more than she needed to win this particular fight on day one. Show me the original blueprints if you've got them. Got better than blueprints. Walter pulled open a drawer stuffed with yellowed paper. Got my father's handwriting on half of this. Man never trusted an architect in his life. Tried to talk me out of you too. And yet, here I am. Yet here you are. He laid the papers flat on the table, and for a moment his hand rested on them the way a man's hand rests on something sacred. 11,000 acres, 4 generations, and not one of them ever needed a stranger from Dallas to tell them how to hold it together. Maybe that's the problem, Marin said, before she could stop herself. Walter's head came up sharp. For a second, she thought she'd lost the job right there at his kitchen plant on it. Hank said you had a mouth on you. He shook his head, already turning back to the blueprints. Eat something before you start work. You look like you haven't slept since Dallas. For an 11 o'clock meeting either. Outside the window, she could see Jonah crossing the yard again, shoulders set the same furious way they'd been by the barn, talking low and fast to Hank with his hands moving like Katie had asked him to argue. What Esther wasn't telling her, Jonah already knew, and from the look on his face, he hated every part of it. Marin picked up the oldest blueprint on the stack. Brittle, soft-cornered, dated in pencil in the bottom right hand. June 1986, the same year carved into the beam. "Mr. Kincaid," she said slowly, "this barn, you didn't build it. Your father did." "That's right. Then who carved Samuel's name into it, and who tried to scratch it back out?" Walter's hand came down flat on the table, not hard, but final. "That," he said, "is the last question about my brother you're going to ask me today." Through the window, Jonah slammed the tailgate of his truck so hard the sound carried straight into the kitchen, and even Walter flinched. Jonah didn't come up behind him until she was already standing close enough to make him jump. "You always slam things when you're trying not to say something?" He turned, and whatever he'd been about to say to Hank died in his throat. "You eavesdropping now on top of everything else? Your kitchen window's open. Half the county's eavesdropping." Marin crossed her arms. "Hank, you mind giving us a minute?" Hank looked between the two of them, weighing something, and apparently decided he wanted no part of it. "I'll be in the equipment shed," he said, and left at a pace that suggested relief, his boots crunching gravel all the way to the shed door without once looking back. Jonah watched him go, then turned back to Marin with his jaw set. "You've been here 2 hours. 2 hours, and I've already learned more about this family's secrets than I wanted to know on day one." She kept her voice even, deliberately so, the way she talked to clients who needed calm more than they needed agreement. "Your father just told me in roughly so many words that there's a brother named Samuel nobody talks about, and that I'm not allowed to ask why. Then don't ask why. I found his name carved into the load-bearing beam I'm supposed to rebuild around, Jonah. I don't get the luxury of not asking why. I need to know how that wood failed, and right now, half of what I'm looking at is damage. It's old damage. Decades old, and somebody's been picking at it for years before the lightning ever touched it." Something moved across his face. Not quite surprise, more like she'd put her finger on a bruise he didn't know was still tender, the kind that only hurts when somebody finds it by accident. "You don't need the family history to fix a barn," he said. "I do if the family history is in the barn." She held up a hand before he could argue further. "I'm not trying to dig up your business for sport. I'm trying to do my job without getting somebody hurt because I didn't understand what I was rebuilding around. That's it. That's the whole of what I want from you right now." Jonah exhaled, long, like he was deflating a fight he'd been ready to have since the moment he saw her truck come up the drive. "Samuel was my dad's older brother," he said finally. "Left the ranch in 1986. Nobody talks about why. By the time I was old enough to ask, it was just understood. You didn't bring it up at dinner. You didn't bring it up at Christmas. You sure as anything didn't bring it up in front of Grandpa Earl before he passed, because the one time my mother tried, he was finishing his plate, and that man never once in his life left a plate unfinished." "He's still alive?" "Samuel died about 9 years back. Some trailer park 2 states over. From what I heard secondhand, because nobody in this family went to find out firsthand." Jonah's voice had gone flat, the careful flatness of a man reciting facts, so he wouldn't have to feel them stacking up. "We didn't go to the funeral, none of us. My mother wanted to. My father said it wouldn't change anything and she let it drop, which still doesn't sit right with me, considering what kind of woman my mother was about everything else." What kind of woman was she? The kind who'd drive 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring soup to a neighbor she barely liked, because she figured being sick was hard enough without being hungry with it. Something in his face softened for the first time since Marin had met him, a crack of warmth showing through the wariness. "She's gone now, too. 6 years. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't do it." He looked at her properly then, like he was seeing the day fresh, like the conversation had cost him something and bought him something else in return. "Look, Miss Calloway. Marin. He said it like it cost him something small, a toll he was choosing to pay. I didn't want you out here. Not because of you specifically. Because every time something new comes onto this ranch, it costs us something we didn't expect to pay. That's just how it's gone the last couple years. New equipment, new debt, new season, new drought, new contractor apparently, new family secret hauled up out of a beam nobody's looked at twice in 40 years. What's it cost you? Specifically, you keep talking in generalities. Give me one thing. He laughed, short and bitter. No real humor in it. You don't waste time, do you? I told you. I need to understand what I'm with. And generalities don't hold weight. Same as untested wood doesn't hold weight. Joe against the truck bed, arms crossed, and for a second she thought he wouldn't answer at all. Then he did, in the clipped, careful way of a man who'd had to explain it too many times already, and hated the explanation every single time, like reopening a wound that never quite scarred over right. Divorced, 2 years ago. My ex took our son 4 hours north, and I see him every other weekend if the roads cooperate, which in winter, they don't always. He said it without looking at her, eyes fixed somewhere past her shoulder on the middle distance. So when my dad brings in a contractor from Dallas to fix a barn that stood for 40 years, forgive me if I'm not real eager going up and rearranging things I've already had rearranged enough for one lifetime. The honesty of it landed harder than she expected. She hadn't asked for that much, and he'd given it anyway, which told her something about him she hadn't expected to learn this fast. I'm not here to rearrange your family, she said quietly. I'm here to fix a roof, and maybe a beam, and then I'll be gone same as I came. Yeah. He looked at her sideways, something assessing in it. We'll see. A truck rattled up the long drive before either of them could say anything else. Dust kicking up behind it in a long brown plume. A man at the wheel who clearly knew the road well enough to take the ruts at speed without slowing down for any of them. He parked crooked, 2 wheels half off the gravel, and got out already talking, briefcase swinging in hand, suit jacket far too clean for ranch country, the kind of fabric that had never once brushed against a fence post. Looking for Walter Kincaid, the man called, scanning the yard like he was pricing it. I was told 11, but the house looked empty, so I figured I'd try the barn. Who's asking? Jonah's whole body had changed in an instant, gone rigid the way it had been when Marin first arrived, except sharper this time, more alert, like a dog catching a scent it didn't like. The man smiled, easy and practiced, the kind of smile that had been worn smooth from years of use on people who didn't want to talk to him. Gideon Cross. I represent some clients with an interest in this property. He glanced at Marin, eyes flicking over her clipboard and her work boots and dismissing her in under a second, then back to Jonah. Didn't realize there'd be company out here. There's no company. There's a contractor. Jonah's voice had dropped low, dangerous, the warning clear in every syllable. What kind of clients? That's a conversation for Mr. Kincaid, I think. Gideon's eyes flicked toward the house, toward the barn, toward the western pasture beyond it, cataloging all of it with the patient, hungry look of a man doing math nobody had asked him to do. Is he in? He's busy. I can wait. Gideon set his briefcase down on the hood of his truck, unhurried, like he had the entire afternoon and intended to use every minute of it. I've got nowhere else to be today. You can leave a card, Jonah said. He'll call you if he wants to. Gideon's smile didn't waver, but something behind it sharpened, the patience turning into something closer to amusement. He reached into his jacket, slow and deliberate, and produced a card, not handing it to Jonah, but holding it out to Marin instead, a small, calculated insult, choosing the stranger over the son standing right in front of him. Tell whoever's in charge, Gideon said, eyes still on Marin, that this concerns a partition agreement from 1986. I expect Mr. Kincaid will want to hear about it sooner rather than later. These things have a way of getting more expensive the longer a family waits to deal with them. What family business is it of yours? How expensive anything gets? Jonah's hands had curled into fists at his sides. None of mine personally. Gideon was already climbing back into his truck, unbothered, the smile never once cracking. I'm just the messenger, Mr. Kincaid. The clients have the actual interest. I'd encourage your father to call the number on that card before the week's out. Some doors, once they're opened by the wrong party, don't stay open on favorable terms for long.